Imagine, you're driving down the highway,
Right.
the radio's playing quietly in the background, and suddenly this specific song comes on, and within maybe 5 seconds, without you consciously trying to do anything at all, the hairs on your arms stand up.
Oh, yeah. The classic chills.
Exactly. Your breathing changes, your heart rate literally begins to sort of sync up to the baseline. And you have to ask yourself, why did a vibrating cone of paper inside your car door just completely hijack your central nervous system?
It feels like magic, right?
Yeah.
But there is actually a deeply biological reason for that reaction. Our brains are basically hardwired to decode those vibrations as really profound emotional and physical signals.
Well, welcome, learner, to today's deep dive. We are trying to understand what might be, honestly, the single most staggering feat the human mind pulls off.
It really is.
It's this ability to take abstract mathematics, raw emotion, and deeply buried memories, and somehow translate all of that into a physical sound wave that can literally make another human being cry.
Yeah, it's wild when you frame it like that.
Right. And today's deep dive is built on this really incredible stack of neuromusical documents. We're looking specifically at the research and materials presented by Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa Formation.
Yes, some truly fascinating work from them.
Totally. So our mission today is to decode the exact biology of how the human brain creates, learns, and, processes music. Whether you're putting on a focus playlist to get through a workday or just passionately singing in the shower.
Which we all do.
Obviously. But understanding this internal neurological symphony, it's going to fundamentally change how you experience your favorite songs.
I completely agree. And, we really need to start by looking at the sheer biological hardware required to build a song. Like, before we can even understand how we feel it, we have to look at the brain structure.
The literal hardware.
Exactly. Writing a piece of music it's basically a full-blown Olympic-level fireworks display happening inside the nervous system.
Okay, so where does that fireworks display actually begin? What physical parts of the brain are required to invent a melody out of thin air?
So it relies on a highly specialized three-part neural network. First, you have the auditory cortex.
Right.
Which is responsible for actually imagining the sound. Then you have the prefrontal cortex, which kind of acts as the architect to give that sound structure.
Okay, so auditory and prefrontal.
Right. And finally, you have the motor cortex and the cerebellum. And those process the physical feeling and the actual, movement required to play the music.
Wait, let me stop you at the auditory cortex for a second. When you say imagining the sound, does a composer actually hear the music inside their head? Or are they just, thinking about the concept of the music?
No, they are actually experiencing a phenomenon called audiation.
Audiation.
Yeah. So when a composer imagines a melody, their primary and secondary auditory cortices activate with the exact same intensity as if they were physically standing in a room listening to a piano being played.
Wait, really? The exact same intensity?
The exact same. They are voluntarily hallucinating frequencies and timbres and complex harmonies.
That sounds completely chaotic. A hallucination is usually totally out of our control, right? But a symphony is mathematical and highly structured. So how does the brain wrangle a hallucinated frequency into a structured piece of art?
Well, that is exactly where the prefrontal cortex steps in to act as the project manager. But it borrows a very specific tool to organize those sounds. It uses Broca's area.
Wait, I remember Broca's area from linguistics.
Yes.
That is the region of the brain that handles verbal language.
Right.
Right. And speech syntax. Are you saying the brain treats a song like a literal spoken language?
Exactly. The brain processes musical syntax, the grammar of a melody or a chord progression, the exact same way it processes verbal grammar in a sentence.
Okay, let me test this right now. If I sing shave and a haircut, too, and I just intentionally stop right there, I leave off the last note.
It hurts, right?
It actually does. The physical annoyance I am feeling in my head right at this exact second, is that what we were talking about?
Yes, that physical annoyance is precisely what neurologists call the N400 error wave.
The N400 error wave.
Right. Your brain is literally flashing a neurological error code. It recognized a grammatical structure. It predicted the resolution based on the syntax of that little melody.
And when it didn't get it?
Exactly. When it did not get that resolution, it registered a grammatical failure. Your brain triggers that exact same N400 alarm whether a sentence stops abruptly in the middle of a thought or a musical progression lands on, an ungrammatical C-sharp.
Wow. Okay, so that explains the hallucination part and the structural grammar part. What about the third part of the network you mentioned? the motor cortex.
Oh, the motor aspect is fascinating because it drastically diverges depending on the type of composer we were talking
I
about.
guess so.
Well, consider a virtuoso pianist like Chopin. His brain operated on what Dr. Delong's material refers to as micromotricity.
Micromotricity, meaning small movements.
Right. Deep inside his motor cortex, there was a hyper-detailed somatotopy.
Somato what?
Somatotopy. It's a literal, highly magnified neurological map of every single finger. His brain possessed profound, independent control of each digit, so it allowed him to literally think in the physical shapes his hands would make on the keyboard.
Oh, wow. So he's thinking in finger shapes. But what happens when someone is writing for like an entire orchestra instead of just a piano?
They have to use macrovision. An orchestrator writing for 40 different instruments has to utilize massive cognitive segregation.
So keeping it all separate.
Yeah, they have to independently hear the flutes, the brass, and the strings in their head simultaneously, all while constantly calculating acoustic fusion.
Acoustic fusion meaning like how those different instruments bleed together in the real world.
Precisely. The composer has to mathematically predict exactly what the overtones of, say, a clarinet and a bassoon will sound like when they actually collide in the air,
Yeah.
long before an orchestra ever plays the piece.
That is mind-blowing.
And on top of that, they must use intense physical empathy. The composer has to unconsciously know that the trumpet player physically needs a moment to take a breath, or that a specific jumping tempo is, biologically impossible for a cellist's hand to actually execute.
Wow. Okay, so if this complex hardware, the hallucinating auditory cortex, the grammar processing, the motor empathy, if all of that is somewhat universal to the human brain, how did the legendary grandmasters wire theirs so uniquely?
That's the big question.
Because, people always romanticize historical geniuses as being magically born with these abilities, just pure innate talent. Looking at these Kinexa Formation documents, does the research point to innate magic, or does the environment hijack the brain biology at specific developmental windows?
The research strongly points to the environment hijacking the biology, without a doubt. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is sort of the ultimate case study in extreme early-stage neuroplasticity.
Because he started so young.
Right, he was totally immersed in playing music at age 3. And during that highly specific window of childhood development, the human brain is an absolute sponge. It's rapidly creating billions of synapses.
Just wiring itself in real time.
Exactly. Because he was completely immersed during that window, his brain literally grew its physical structure around music.
So music became his native biological language rather than something he had to translate.
Yes, and it actually resulted in a very distinct physical anomaly. Mozart developed a significantly thickened corpus callosum.
Which, remind me.
That is the thick biological cable bridging the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Because his connection was so robust, he experienced instant communication between his logical structuring centers and his intuitive emotional centers.
Which totally explains why his original handwritten manuscripts famously have almost zero crossed-out notes or corrections on them.
Exactly. He experienced zero friction between the hallucination in his auditory cortex and the motor action of writing it down on paper. Furthermore, this thickened connection allowed him to utilize his parietal areas, and those normally handle visual spatial processing. But he used them to visualize an entire symphony at once.
So he didn't see it as a timeline.
No, he did not process a song as a timeline moving from left to right. He perceived the entire piece of music simultaneously, basically the way you or I would look at a painting.
That is insane. Okay, so if Mozart proves the brain can physically build itself around sound, what happens when a composer loses their physical connection to sound entirely? Like, I am thinking of Beethoven going deaf.
Ah, Beethoven.
Yeah.
He represents the staggering power of pure neuroplasticity. When he lost his hearing, his auditory cortex was no longer receiving any real physical sound waves from the outside world.
Right, the hardware broke.
Exactly. But the brain is incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
So it completely repurposed that unused auditory area entirely for internal cortical simulation.
So he had to rely 100% on the internal hallucination.
He relied on that internal simulation and also heavily on proprioceptive memory.
What is that?
He had to remember the precise physical sensation of how his fingers felt when they struck a specific chord on the piano in order to know what that chord sounded like.
Oh, wow.
He was essentially playing the ghost of a piano inside his own nervous system. It proves that music is primarily a deep internal cognitive activity. It's not merely a sensory reaction to the outside world.
Wait, is proprioceptive memory basically what happens when you type your computer password incredibly fast without looking at the keyboard?
Yes.
Like you aren't reciting the actual letters in your head, your fingers just unconsciously remember the spatial shape and the physical feeling of typing that specific word.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Hmm.
Beethoven was basically typing the password to his symphony using the spatial memory of his hands.
That's wild. So we have Mozart, the natural integrator, and Beethoven, the master of internal simulation. But the sources also highlight Bach as a completely different archetype.
Oh, yeah. Bach was the pure mathematician. He heavily utilized the parietal lobe, which again is the area of the brain used for mathematics and spatial logic. He essentially treated music like geometry and code.
How exactly do you do math with music? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, he would write a melodic theme,
Right.
and then he would write it completely backwards.
It's just reversed.
Yeah, a technique called a retrograde inversion. He was famous for writing musical fractals. Imagine a Russian nesting doll made of sound.
Okay.
He would write a melody playing at a very slow tempo, and hidden entirely inside of that slow melody was the exact same melody being played at twice the speed.
You're kidding.
No,
Yeah.
he was practically writing complex computer algorithms, just using acoustic sound waves instead of silicon.
Okay, this brings up a really practical question for you, the listener, right now. Most of us did not start composing musical fractals at age 3.
Definitely not.
So when a normal adult decides they want to, learn the guitar or the piano, how does a standard brain actually physically transform to learn an instrument?
Well, honestly, it begins with intense exhaustion.
Oh, great.
It's true. Learning an instrument is incredibly draining
Yeah.
because the prefrontal cortex, that project manager we discussed earlier, becomes completely overwhelmed.
Because there's so much to do.
Right. It has to consciously think about your posture, reading the sheet music, maintaining the rhythm, and the exact physical placement of your fingers, all simultaneously.
So your mental memory buffer is just completely maxed out trying to keep all those plates spinning.
Exactly. The brain is desperately trying to connect neurons that have never spoken to each other before.
Mm.
It relies on Hebb's law, which basically states that neurons that fire together wire together.
Great, I've heard that.
But in the early stages, creating those new connections is a massive, highly inefficient energy drain.
See, I always heard that we push through that exhausting energy drain because we get a rush of dopamine when we finally play the song correctly. But the research from Dr. Delong says that is actually a myth.
It is a profound misunderstanding of how dopamine functions in the learning process. Dopamine is not simply a reward chemical released just because you succeeded at a task.
It's not.
No, it is released specifically during a prediction error.
An error implies something went wrong, though. How does an error help us learn?
So in neurology, a prediction error simply means a gap between what the brain expected to happen and what actually happened.
Oh, I see.
When you are learning an instrument, you constantly expect to play the wrong note. Or you play a note expecting it to sound beautiful and it sounds terrible. That is a negative prediction error.
Right, the squawk of a beginner violin.
Exactly. But when you finally hit the right note, your brain experiences a positive prediction error.
Yeah.
You are pleasantly surprised.
Ah.
That sudden, unexpected alignment of the physical movement you made and the beautiful sound you wanted to produce triggers a massive dopamine spike. That dopamine acts like a biological save button, permanently encoding that specific sequence of movements in your memory.
So the pleasant surprise is what actually teaches the brain. That makes so much sense. But how do we go from slowly hitting the right notes via surprise to playing with the incredible, effortless speed of a professional?
The secret to virtuosity is myelination.
Myelination.
Yes. When you repeatedly send an electrical signal down the exact same neural pathway, meaning, when you practice the same piano scale perfectly over and over, your brain recognizes that this pathway is important.
Okay.
So it dispatches specialized cells to wrap those specific neural cables in a white fat called myelin.
It is physically insulating the biological wire.
Precisely. And the results of that insulation are staggering. An uninsulated, unmyelinated nerve signal travels through the brain at about 3 kilometers per hour.
Too slow.
Right. But a fully myelinated expert pathway transmits that exact same signal at 300 kilometers per hour.
Wow. 100 times faster.
Exactly. The virtuoso musician does not actually think 100 times faster than the beginner. Their biological wiring has just become highly conductive.
So the brain is adding speed through insulation. But the sources mention it is also deleting things to make playing easier.
Yes, through a process called synaptic pruning. The brain actively destroys useless neural connections.
Like what?
Well, when you first learn to play the violin, your shoulders might naturally tense up or your jaw might clench. Those are parasitic neural connections wasting energy.
Oh, I definitely do that when I'm trying to learn something new.
We all do. But as you achieve mastery through perfect repetition, the brain prunes those parasitic pathways away, sculpting the physical movement down to pure, effortless efficiency.
You know, learning an instrument sounds exactly like hacking through a dense, overgrown jungle with a machete. You are moving incredibly slowly, you're exhausted, and you're constantly tripping over roots.
Yes,
But achieving mastery is like pouring a paved, beautifully lit concrete highway over that exact same path. Suddenly, you can cruise at 200 miles per hour in the dead of night without even thinking about how to operate the car. You just sit back and enjoy the ride.
I love that visualization. And because you are cruising on autopilot, your prefrontal cortex is finally liberated. You completely stop thinking about how to play the instrument, and you can finally start thinking about why you are playing it.
You can just focus entirely on expressing emotion.
Exactly.
Now, this biological highway evolved over thousands of years to interact with physical instruments made of wood, brass, and animal hair.
Right.
How is modern technology, like a laptop or a digital synthesizer, fundamentally changing the musical brain today? Because the research from Kinexa Formation frames this as a cognitive shift from the architect to the sculptor.
It is a massive cognitive evolution. The classical composer is the architect. As we discussed with orchestration, they work via delayed simulation. They write a complex note on parchment, and they might not actually hear it played out loud by a physical orchestra for 6 months.
So they have to rely completely on their internal memory and audiation.
Exactly. But today's producer, sitting in a bedroom studio with a laptop, operates completely differently. They are the sculptor. A modern digital audio workstation, or DAW, provides an immediate sensory motor feedback loop. The producer presses a key on a digital controller, turns a virtual knob, and hears the exact synthesizer frequency instantly.
Right, there's no waiting 6 months.
Exactly. They're not predicting the future acoustic fusion, they're reacting in real time. This triggers rapid, constant action-reaction dopamine loops. The cognitive process is incredibly intense, but in terms of processing speed and feedback, it is actually much closer to playing a fast-paced video game than writing sheet music.
The sources point out that this modern process is also heavily visual, right? Producers are literally looking at the music on their computer screens.
Absolutely. Modern production relies heavily on the visual cortex. The music is represented on the screen as brightly colored blocks, intricate grids, and physical waveforms.
Right, like seeing the sound wave.
Yeah. A producer can visually see that a drum beat is slightly off-tempo just by looking at the grid, long before they even press play to listen to it. They are literally sculpting sound waves with a computer mouse. It connects visual spatial processing directly to audio creation in a way Mozart never had to contend with.
Okay, so if modern producers are relying this heavily on the visual cortex to literally see music on a digital screen, are we watching the human brain evolve a completely new type of visual spatial musical intelligence right now?
Connecting this to the broader rules of neuroplasticity, the answer is absolutely yes. The human brain always wires itself to optimize the tools it uses.
That's fascinating.
Someone like the legendary film composer Hans Zimmer is the ultimate modern hybrid of these two brains.
Because he does both.
Right. He possesses the classical architectural vision to construct a massive, emotionally complex symphony in his head, but he uses modern digital technology to visually sculpt the intricate textural frequencies of the sound in real time.
Wow. But you know, whether the music is written on parchment by candlelight or dragged and dropped on a MacBook Pro, it ultimately hits the listener's ear.
Very true.
And it does so using 3 fundamental ingredients: melody, rhythm, and harmony. Let's unpack the recipe for a song and exactly how the listener's brain processes each ingredient. Starting with melody. Where does a catchy melody actually come from before it hits the page?
Neurologically speaking, a melody never comes from nowhere. It is basically an unconscious remix. Your brain contains a massive, lifelong library of every lullaby, pop song, and bird chirp you have ever heard.
Just a giant database.
Exactly. And when a composer seeks a melody, the brain begins splicing these fragments together.
So it's mining that associative database of memories?
Yes, but melodies are also highly physical. Many iconic melodies are actually born from motor errors.
Like mistakes.
Yeah. A jazz pianist accidentally slipping their finger onto the wrong key, and the brain instantly recognizing that the unexpected tension is actually brilliant.
Oh, that's cool.
Furthermore, melody is deeply tied to our internal biological state. A melancholic, sad melody often directly mimics the literal prosody, which is the rising pitch and falling cadence of a crying human voice.
Wait, really? A sad song sounds sad to our brains because it literally mimics the acoustic frequency of someone weeping?
Yes,
It
exactly.
is incredibly dark, but also makes perfect sense. But to access that associative database and find those melodies, you kind of have to get out of your own way, right?
Crucially, yes. You have to turn off the prefrontal cortex, which acts as your inner critic. You have to activate the default mode network.
What's that?
That is the region of the brain that turns on when you are completely relaxed and daydreaming. It is exactly why the absolute best melodies hit you when you are standing in the shower or driving mindlessly on the highway.
Because the judge is asleep.
Exactly, the internal judge is asleep, and the associative brain is free to play and remix.
Okay, so that explains melody, which gives the song its story. What about rhythm?
Oh, rhythm is entirely primal. It completely bypasses the higher logical processing centers of the brain and shoots straight into the basal ganglia and the cerebellum.
Which are the deep motor control centers, right?
Yes. And this triggers a biological phenomenon called entrainment. When you hear a strong driving beat, the neurons in your motor centers physically begin to fire at the exact frequency of that beat.
The neurons are literally syncing their electrical pulses to the tempo of the song.
They are.
Hmm.
You are quite literally dancing inside your head before you ever move a single physical muscle.
Wow.
It is why it is almost biologically impossible for a human being to sit perfectly still when a great groove is playing. Your brain is already entrained to it.
All right, so melody is the story. Rhythm makes us physically move. That leaves harmony.
Harmony is the physics of emotion. It is entirely dictated by the neurological balance of tension and release.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, when musical notes are consonant, meaning their physical sound waves align mathematically and clean, even ratios like 3 to 2 our brain processes that mathematical perfection easily. It feels incredibly stable. It makes us feel safe.
So what happens when the notes clash and create dissonance?
Dissonance occurs when those sound waves do not mathematically align. They create actual acoustic roughness in the air.
Roughness.
Yes, and your brain detects this mathematical anomaly as a problem that desperately needs to be solved. It creates a feeling of psychological friction, and your brain actually releases a microdose of the stress hormone, cortisol.
Cortisol, the stress hormone.
Yes, you feel physically tense. You sit there waiting for the music to resolve back to a consonant safe place.
Okay, so basically composers are effectively acting as emotional pharmacists.
Huh. I love that.
No, seriously. They intentionally prescribe the listener a microdose of cortisol by using dissonant, clashing notes to make us feel stressed and physically tense. And they do that entirely to set us up for the massive dopamine relief we get when they finally resolve the chord back to a consonant, safe ratio.
That is exactly the chemical manipulation they are executing.
Yeah.
Without that carefully prescribed cortisol, without that engineered tension, the music would be incredibly boring. The sheer beauty of a song is found in the brain's journey from mild distress back to profound relief.
Man, we have traced an unbelievable journey today. I mean, we started with the spark of a voluntary hallucination inside the auditory cortex.
Right.
We explored how those sounds get strictly organized by the language centers and how the brain pushes through the exhausting jungle of learning to pave lightning-fast, myelinated superhighways.
The 300-kilometer-an-hour highway.
Exactly. We examine how modern digital tools are physically reshaping the visual musical brain. And finally, we break down the precise chemical cocktails of tension, cortisol, and dopamine release that make us deeply obsessively love our favorite songs.
It really proves that listening to music is never a passive activity. It is a highly active, whole-brain biological workout.
Absolutely. So for you listening, the next time you find yourself tapping your steering wheel to a driving beat or getting full-body goosebumps from a massive chord change in a movie theater, take a second to appreciate the absolute Olympic-level fireworks display happening inside your own neuromotor system. You aren't just casually hearing a song, your brain is actively recreating the magic trick.
And the human nervous system executes that magic trick flawlessly. Pretty much every single time.
It's amazing. But, it does leave us with one final, slightly unnerving thought to ponder on your own. Yeah. If our brains are this deeply, predictably hardwired to respond to specific mathematical ratios, positive prediction errors, and tension-release dopamine loops, as artificial intelligence gets better and better at reading human biofeedback, how long will it be before algorithms can generate completely personalized, never-ending songs that perfectly map your unique dopamine receptors, creating custom music you literally cannot stop listening to?